I don't know exactly when the world turned on me, but I remember the moment I realized it had. It was a Saturday, and the sky was one of those dull Midwestern grays that makes everything look like a crime scene, even if nothing's happened yet. I just pulled into the Walmart parking lot to grab a few things for the weekend, some mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, and a few packs of juice boxes. My son, Caleb, was supposed to spend Sunday with me, the first time in 2 weeks, and I wanted to make sure everything was just right. I parked my old Silverado, shut off the engine, and there they were. Amber, my ex-wife, and Brad. Yeah. Brad. The guy who used to fix her brakes and ended up breaking our marriage instead. They didn't see me right away, and maybe that was a blessing. I caught them near the cart return, arms wrapped around each other like a scene out of some cheap romantic comedy. She had that same smirk she wore when she handed me the divorce papers, like she was in on some joke the rest of us poor suckers missed. I was about to just walk past and ignore them, like I always did, but then I heard it. Laughter. Not just the happy kind. The mocking kind. The kind that stings. You should have seen his face when I told the judge I didn't feel safe with Caleb around him, she said, just loud enough for it to carry. He looked like someone kicked his puppy. Got full custody without even breaking a sweat. Brad chuckled, then added, "Man, you really played him. Took the kid and the house. What else is left?" His pride, maybe, Amber snorted. But I'm sure I'll figure out how to take that too. They walked off, still laughing. I stood there for a long while, holding my keys so tight the teeth left impressions in my palm. It was true, what she said. I didn't even get joint custody. Just visitation every other weekend, and even that came with rules stacked so high I needed a damn ladder to keep up. I wasn't some monster. I didn't yell. I never hit. Hell, I folded laundry and kissed boo-boos and coached t-ball when other dads didn't show. But when Amber got bored, when life didn't look shiny enough for her anymore, she took what mattered and made me look like the bad guy on her way out. For a long time, I just took it. I swallowed my pride, paid the child support, and smiled for Caleb. That's what dads do, right? We take the hits so our kids don't have to. But something shifted in me that day, standing in that damn parking lot. Maybe it was the way they laughed. Or maybe it was the way they talked about my boy like he was some pawn in their little game. Whatever it was, something broke loose inside me. I wasn't going to let this stand forever. I didn't know how just yet, but I was going to find a way to turn the tables. Not for me. Not out of spite. For Caleb. Because one day, that boy would grow up and ask questions. And when he did, I wanted to have a damn good answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spin slow circles above me, wondering how the hell everything slipped so far out of my hands. The house felt too quiet, too big for one man. The hum of the refrigerator down the hall was the only real sound, aside from the occasional creak of old floorboards and the rustle of wind against the siding. I kept seeing her face, Amber's, twisted into that smirk. And Brad's laugh, low and smug, rolling through my head like a bad country song I couldn't turn off. But more than anything, I kept thinking of Caleb. He was only 8. Big eyes, soft heart, smarter than people gave him credit for. And stuck in the middle of a mess he didn't ask for. I hated that. I hated how he didn't get a say. I hated how Amber yanked him around like he was a suitcase and not a person. The thing is, I never stopped being his dad. Not even when the court said I was non-custodial. I was still the man who showed him how to tie his sneakers and whistle through his teeth. I still kept every drawing he ever gave me in a shoebox under the bed. And I still called him every night, even if Amber barely picked up anymore. I knew I had to play this smart. If I acted out, yelled or tried to fight fire with fire, I'd prove her right. I'd look unstable. Dangerous, even. I'd be the angry ex she already painted me to be. But I wasn't that man. So I did what she never expected. I got patient. First thing Monday morning, I started doing research. Not the kind of revenge movie nonsense you see in Hollywood, but quiet things. I looked into Caleb's school, checked out their policies, their pickup rules, who worked there, who I needed to talk to. I started asking questions at the county clerk's office about parental rights, about school enrollment and modifications to custody. I stayed up late every night, reading through custody laws and collecting any scrap of information I could use. I also started keeping a journal. Everything Amber said. Every time she flaked on a visitation. Every time she was late, or let Caleb skip a call. I wrote it all down, printed screenshots, saved voicemails. It was all going into a quiet little folder labeled "For Later." I kept it close. At the same time, I got more involved with Caleb, every chance I got. I didn't just settle for our every other weekend visits. I started showing up at his school for events. Parent days. Little league games. I'd wave from the stands, give him that thumbs up only he and I understood. The one I used to give him when he was scared of the dark. Amber didn't like it. I could see the fire behind her eyes every time I showed up. She'd pull him closer, whisper in his ear like I wasn't even there. But I didn't let it shake me. One afternoon, after a school science fair, Caleb ran up to me while Amber was still talking to her friends. "Dad," he said, "can I come over next weekend too? Even if it's not my turn?" I crouched down beside him, my heart twisting. "I'd love that, buddy. You just gotta ask your mom, okay?" He nodded, then whispered, "You're nicer than her boyfriend. He's mean when mom's not around." I looked up. Amber was still laughing with some other moms, not even paying attention. I smiled at Caleb, but my hand balled into a fist behind my back. I had my reason now. Not just to win, but to protect. The next few months, I kept laying groundwork. I made friends with the school's front office lady, Miss Jenkins, a sweet woman with silver hair and a sharp memory. I always said good morning, asked about her grandkids, brought donuts on Fridays. People like that remember kindness. I volunteered for the school's fall fundraiser. I joined the PTA mailing list under my full name and made sure I was present at every event. I made myself a part of the landscape, unshakable and reliable. The more visible I became, the more cracks I started to see in Amber's picture-perfect image. One time she forgot to pick Caleb up from a field trip, and the school had to call me. Another time she sent him to class without lunch, and he told the teacher I always packed better snacks anyway. I never said a word against her. I just kept notes. Because that's how you build revenge that sticks. Not with a scream, but with silence, and a plan. By the time winter came around, I had what I needed. Proof that she wasn't looking out for him like she said. Evidence of neglect. Witnesses from school. A paper trail of her carelessness. But the final piece didn't fall into place until that Tuesday morning in March. It was 7:55 a.m. I just finished my coffee and stepped out onto the porch when my phone rang. It was the school. Caleb had been dropped off early, by Brad. Not Amber. Not even close to it. Brad. I gritted my teeth, listened as Miss Jenkins explained he'd tried to sign Caleb in without any ID, and how she recognized him from that one fundraiser where he yelled at the janitor. "You might want to come down," she said quietly. "Caleb's asking for you." I didn't hesitate. I threw on a flannel, grabbed my keys, and drove straight there. When I arrived, Caleb was sitting on a little bench in the front office, swinging his feet, eyes wide and unsure. Miss Jenkins smiled and waved me back. And that's when I saw it. Brad's name written on the sign-in sheet, scrawled in sloppy pen. And Amber? Nowhere to be found. That was it. The final straw. And it was dropped right in my lap. I knelt in front of Caleb on that bench, trying not to let the heat rising in my chest show on my face. He looked up at me like I was his whole world, confused, nervous, but relieved. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, brushing his hair back. "You okay?" He nodded. "Brad said Mom was tired and couldn't drive. He just dropped me off and told me to run in." Miss Jenkins chimed in from behind the counter, didn't give us any paperwork. Said he was family now, and walked off before we could stop him. I turned to her, keeping my tone steady. "And you logged all that, right?" She held up the sign-in sheet like a badge of honor. "We write down everything here, Mr. Tyler. Especially the folks who act like they're too important for rules." I gave her a grateful nod. Then I turned back to Caleb. "You want to hang with me for a bit before class starts?" He smiled, that kind of innocent, pure smile kids only have before the world hardens them. "Can we listen to the truck songs?" I chuckled. "Of course we can." We walked out hand in hand, and that moment, him gripping my pinky like he used to when he was little, I knew for sure I was going to win. Not just out of pride anymore. Not even for revenge. For him. That night, I made copies of the sign-in sheet. I wrote down the conversation word for word. I logged the date, the time, everything. I even recorded Caleb telling me, in his own words, what happened. Not to share with anyone, just to have it, in case it ever came to it. Then I called my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce ended. She was a small-town type, didn't wear heels or makeup, but she knew the court system better than anyone I'd ever met. Her name was Joy. Fitting, right? She answered with a sigh. "Tyler? Thought I'd seen the last of you." "I've got a custody violation," I said. "You free for coffee tomorrow?" She paused for a beat. "If it's real, I'm buying." The next morning, I laid everything out for her, my journal, the copies, the printouts, even the signed school sheet. Joy scanned through it all with the eye of a hawk and a smirk that reminded me of the opposite of Amber's. This smirk was earned. Tactical. Sharp. "You've been building a case," she said, thumbing through the pages. "I've been living one," I replied. She leaned back. "Judges don't reverse custody easily, but this? This is a start. You've shown stability, concern, school involvement. And Brad dropping your kid off with no ID? That's a risk the court won't like. What do I do next?" I asked. She tapped her pen against her notebook. "You file a motion for temporary custody. Emergency, if we play it right. You present the pattern. Not just this one incident, everything. And we keep the tone calm, measured, like we're trying to protect Caleb. Not attack Amber." "I don't want to attack her," I said, though part of me clenched my jaw at the thought. "I just want my son safe." Joy nodded. "Good. That's exactly what the judge will want to hear." Over the next 3 weeks, I did everything Joy told me to do. We filed the paperwork. Served Amber quietly. Prepared for a hearing. I didn't tell Caleb anything. I kept everything normal, visits, dinner, baseball on the weekends. He didn't need to know yet. But I noticed little things. He started asking more questions. Like why I couldn't pick him up more. Why Brad got so mad when he spilled juice on the carpet. Why his mom seemed sad all the time lately. I never badmouthed her. Never even hinted at anything. But I did start telling him the truth in pieces. "Your dad's always going to show up for you," I'd say, tucking him in. "No matter what." He'd smile and whisper, "Even if it's not your turn?" I'd grin. Especially then. The day of the court hearing came fast. I wore my cleanest jeans, a tucked-in button-down, and boots that were scuffed but honest. Joy told me to speak slow, look the judge in the eye, and let her do the heavy lifting. Amber showed up late. She looked flustered, hair in a loose bun, sunglasses on indoors. Brad wasn't with her, which was the smartest thing she could have done. But she walked in like she'd already won. When the judge asked her if she was aware that someone other than herself had dropped Caleb at school without documentation, her face twisted like she'd bit into a lemon. "I had a migraine," she said. Brad helped out. "He isn't listed as a guardian," the judge replied flatly. "And he failed to provide ID or contact the school. That's a breach of the existing custody order." Amber's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Joy stepped in next. Presented the log. The late pickups. The missed calls. The lunchless days. She did it all calmly, like she was describing the weather. And when the judge finally turned to me, I stood and kept my voice steady. "All I want is what's best for my son. I'm not trying to take him away from his mother. I just want to make sure he's safe, looked after, and knows he's got a dad who cares." There was silence for a long time. Then the judge said, "I'm awarding temporary joint custody, effective immediately. Mr. Tyler will have weekday rights to pick up and drop off Caleb at school, pending further review." Amber's head snapped toward me. And for the first time in months, it wasn't her smirking. Later that day, as I picked Caleb up from school for the first time in a long time, he saw me waiting near the truck and ran straight into my arms. "You're picking me up now?" he beamed. I knelt down. "Yeah, bud. I'll be taking you to school too. How's that sound?" He looked up at me, eyes wide. "Awesome." I opened the truck door, helped him in, and turned the key. Brad and Amber had laughed about making a fool out of me. But now? The first domino had fallen. And I was just getting started. It was a strange feeling, that first week of shared custody. I hadn't realized how much I missed the ordinary parts, the early morning cereal chatter, the scrambled homework routines, the way Caleb hummed to himself in the back seat while I drove him to school, always off-key, always happy. He was still too young to understand the court's decision, but he knew one thing: Dad was around more. And to him, that was all that mattered. To me, it was the start of something bigger. Each morning, I showed up 5 minutes early. I made sure his shoes were tied, his lunch was packed, and his jacket zipped up tight. At pickup, I greeted every teacher I saw. I talked to Miss Jenkins. I offered to help during a school cleanup day. I signed up for the parent email list, then volunteered to chaperone the next field trip. People noticed. I wasn't just showing up. I was being seen. One afternoon, as I stood in the pickup line chatting with Miss Jenkins about the PDA's plans for new swing sets, I saw Amber's car around the corner. It was a black SUV, clean, polished, just like Brad's image. But it wasn't Brad behind the wheel. It was Amber, finally doing the pickups again. Maybe the judge's words had rattled her, or maybe Brad realized he'd been seen one too many times at the school. She didn't even look at me. Didn't wave, didn't scowl, didn't breathe in my direction. But Caleb hesitated when he saw her, glancing back at me before walking toward her passenger door. That tiny pause said more than any court order. Later that week, I got a call from Joy. "We've got momentum," she said. The court set a follow-up hearing for 60 days out. If we can show continued stability, school engagement, and build on what we've already documented. She let the silence hang for a second. "We can push for full custody, Tyler." Those words hung in my chest like warm bricks, heavy, solid, real. "What do I need to do?" She chuckled. "What you've been doing. Keep showing up. Keep being dad." But being dad wasn't always easy. Especially when I started seeing the cracks in Caleb that he didn't know how to hide. At dinner one night, he poked at his mac and cheese instead of eating it. "Everything okay, bud?" He shrugged. Brad got mad 'cause I left my socks on the floor. Said only lazy kids do that. My grip on the fork tightened. You're not lazy. You're a kid. He said I'm soft like you. The fork dropped. I took a breath. Well, I don't know what Brad thinks he knows, but there's nothing wrong with being kind. Or careful. Or soft. You can be soft and strong at the same time. Caleb looked up, trying to believe me. So I told him the truth. I don't care what Brad says. I know you. You're smart. You're curious. And you're mine. That's all that matters. He smiled, small, shy, but it was there. Meanwhile, I was keeping tabs the way any small-town guy does, through friends, whispers, and well-placed questions. Turns out Brad wasn't just a pain in my side. He had a reputation around town for being loud at bars and louder when folks didn't agree with him. A few coworkers mentioned he'd gotten into a shouting match outside a grocery store, something about a parking spot. It wasn't much. But it was something. So I started keeping notes again. Dates. Times. Names. Not for revenge. For leverage. I had no intention of sinking to their level. But if I was going to protect Caleb, I needed every tool in the toolbox. Then came the field trip. The school was short on volunteers, so when I offered to drive the bus and hand out juice boxes, they took me up quick. We went to a petting farm just outside of town. Caleb was over the moon. He named every goat. Tried to pet a rooster. Even got pecked on the shoe, which he proudly called his war wound. But the real moment happened during lunch. Caleb was sitting between me and a girl from his class, her pigtails lopsided and her smile missing a tooth. He looked over at me and whispered, "Can you come on all the trips?" "I'll try," I said. "I like it when you're there," he said, then added, "You don't yell. You just listen." That hit me harder than any insult Brad or Amber ever tossed my way. That was the truth from a kid who didn't know how to lie. Later that night, after I dropped him off, I sat in my truck a few houses down and watched their porch. I wasn't spying. I was waiting. Waiting to see what Caleb walked into when I wasn't there. It didn't take long. The door opened again. Amber stepped out, phone to her ear, pacing. She was shouting, though I couldn't make out the words. She threw her hands up, then turned back into the house. A few seconds later, Brad came storming out. Shirtless, angry. He lit a cigarette, cussed into the phone, and threw a beer can into the yard. I took a picture. Time-stamped it. Then I drove away. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about building a wall of truth so tall, so unshakable, no one could knock it down, not even with a dozen smirks or cruel little jokes. They thought they'd taken everything from me. But the thing about planting seeds? You don't see the roots growing. Until one day, you look around and realize you've grown a whole damn tree. And mine was starting to cast a long, long shadow. By the second month of shared custody, the air had changed. I felt it in the way Caleb's backpack was better organized on my days. I saw it in how he didn't flinch when I raised my voice, not in anger, just to call him in for dinner. And I heard it in the way his laugh had started to return, full, unfiltered, the kind of laugh that kids have before the world tells them to tone it down. But even as things settled for us, I knew storm clouds were forming over at Amber's house. I could sense it like a shift in the wind. And soon, I'd see it with my own eyes. It happened the Friday before spring break. I showed up at the school a little early. Caleb's class was watching a movie, and I'd promised to help clean up afterward. As I waited in the hallway, Mrs. Perry, the assistant principal, walked by and paused. "Oh. Tyler, I've been meaning to tell you," she said, adjusting the file folders in her arms. "We had a bit of an incident last week with Caleb." My spine went cold. What kind of incident? She gave a small sigh. Nothing serious. One of the aides overheard him say something about his stepdad, yelling. Said he gets mad about little things. We documented it, of course, and we've been keeping an eye. But Caleb didn't seem scared. Just unsure. I nodded slowly. Thanks for letting me know. She smiled kindly. He seems to really blossom when you're around. You've made quite the impression here. That stuck with me all the way home. That night, while Caleb slept, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the photos and notes I'd been keeping. Everything was labeled by date. Time. Description. A little journal of missteps and meltdowns, none of them mine. Amber's public image was still intact. Brad, too. But behind closed doors, the cracks were getting wider. The shouting. The beer cans. The slammed doors. And now my son was starting to talk about it, even if only in whispers. It was time to do something more. The next morning, I called Joy. You've done more than enough groundwork, she said. Let me file the paperwork to reopen the custody hearing early. This is your shot, Tyler. We're going to make it count. What else can I do? Document everything. And keep showing up at school. I'll subpoena the records from the school counselor. Let's get statements from anyone who's noticed a change in Caleb's mood. Joy didn't just talk like a lawyer, she talked like someone who cared. She didn't want to destroy Amber. She wanted to protect Caleb. So did I. Later that weekend, while Caleb was napping on the couch with our old dog Moose curled up at his feet, I walked out to the garage and pulled open an old cardboard box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were photo albums, our wedding, Caleb's birth, the birthday parties I used to throw in the backyard before Brad showed up with his shiny truck and even shinier teeth. I flipped through those old memories, not out of nostalgia but to remind myself of one thing. I was there first. When Amber had a C-section, I was the one who held her hand. When Caleb cried at night, I was the one who rocked him back to sleep. Brad hadn't earned a damn thing. He was borrowing the life I built, and using it to puff himself up. But I wasn't going to shout about it. I was going to prove it. The next school day, I handed a sealed envelope to Miss Jenkins. Inside were printouts, photos, notes, and a letter I'd written explaining what Caleb had shared, and what I'd seen firsthand. I'm not asking you to take sides, I told her. But if anything ever seems off, please don't ignore it. She looked me in the eye, serious as a heart attack. We'd never ignore it, Tyler. We're watching out for him. And I believed her. Because while Amber and Brad were busy trying to spin their perfect little life, they didn't realize something. People notice. Especially when the smiles start looking forced. Especially when the boy looks tired. I didn't tell Caleb about the upcoming court date. I just told him that I'd be there to take him to school every day that week. He grinned so wide his gums showed. And then, as if he could sense the storm shifting in our favor, he asked something he'd never asked before. Can I bring something to school for show and tell? Sure, bud. What do you want to bring? He held up a photo I'd printed a few nights earlier, the one of him sitting on my shoulders at the petting farm, his smile stretched across his face, goat in the background. I want to tell them about my dad. That was the moment I realized something big. Revenge wasn't about making Amber and Brad suffer. It was about reclaiming the space they tried to take from me. About being present. Real. Reliable. Because when you do right by your kid long enough, he starts to see through the lies on his own. And when he starts seeing clearly, that's when you've already won. The day of the custody hearing arrived under a dull gray sky, like even the weather knew it wasn't going to be a day of smiles. I didn't wear a suit. I wore what I always wore, dark jeans, a clean flannel shirt, boots I'd had for years. I didn't want to look like I was trying to be something I wasn't. I wanted the judge to see the man who made pancakes on Saturdays, who sewed buttons back onto Caleb's shirts, who kept every finger painting the kid ever made. Outside the courthouse, I spotted Amber and Brad by their SUV. She had her hair done up real nice, nails red as blood, arms crossed like she'd already decided the outcome. Brad wore a smug grin, dark blazer over jeans, sunglasses on like he was walking into a music video instead of family court. I nodded once, said nothing. Let them smile now. Inside the courtroom, I sat at the long table beside Joy. She had her papers laid out, color-coded tabs fluttering in place. Across the aisle, Amber's lawyer looked young, green. Probably someone Brad found on a golf course. When the judge entered, the room stood still. Her nameplate read Honorable Clara Jenkins, and she didn't look like the type who liked drama. Joy stood. Your Honor, we are requesting a modification to the custody agreement based on new behavioral and emotional concerns witnessed by educators and supported by documentation. She passed forward the folders we'd prepared. I saw Amber lean toward her lawyer and whisper something sharp. Joy continued. We have statements from school staff noting behavioral regression in Caleb while in the mother's care, references to emotional distress, and indications of possible verbal altercations involving her partner, Mr. Bradford Lane. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have witness statements? Yes, Your Honor. Included in Exhibit A. It was all there, Mrs. Perry's notes, the school counselor's observations, even a discreet little email from Miss Jenkins saying Caleb seemed visibly happier, more confident after weekends with me. Then the judge asked, Do you have anything to say, Mr. Edwards? I stood. My son isn't a trophy, I said simply. He's a little boy who needs peace, love, and someone who listens. I'm not asking for more time because I hate my ex-wife. I'm asking because Caleb is telling us, without even realizing it, that something's wrong. And I'm here to do what I've always done, protect him. I sat back down, feeling the fire in my chest settle into something stronger, purpose. Amber's lawyer stammered through a defense about adjustment periods and subjectivity of emotional accounts, but it didn't land. Even the judge looked bored. When Amber took the stand, her tone was syrupy sweet. I've done my best. Raising a child after divorce isn't easy. Brad has been a wonderful stepfather. Maybe Caleb just needs more structure. Then she smirked toward me, just enough for me to see it. That same look she had in the diner that night, the one that said, You'll never win. But I wasn't that guy anymore. Not the one who backed down when she made fun of my job. Not the one who stayed quiet when she lied. Now I had the truth on my side. The judge recessed for lunch and told us she'd return with her decision by afternoon. I went outside to breathe. The sun had started to break through the clouds, warming the brick steps of the courthouse. That's when I saw Caleb's drawing again. I'd folded it into my coat pocket for luck. It was a crayon picture of me and him holding hands under a tree. The sun had a smiley face. In little shaky letters, it said, Me and Dad. Safe. My throat tightened. I slipped it back into my coat like a prayer. Back in the courtroom, the judge didn't waste time. I've reviewed all evidence, and in light of the child's consistent emotional feedback, corroborated by multiple non-family sources, I am modifying the custody arrangement to grant Mr. Edwards primary custody during the school year. Amber shot up. That's ridiculous. He's manipulating. Sit down, the judge snapped. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just bowed my head and whispered, Thank you. Because this wasn't about hurting Amber. It was about saving Caleb. After it ended, Joy clapped me on the back. You did it, Tyler. No, I said. We did. And Caleb, he's gonna be okay. As I walked out into the sunlight, Brad glared at me from the bottom of the steps. For the first time, his grin was gone. I stepped past him, slow and steady, like a man who no longer feared the shadows. And just loud enough for him to hear, I said, "Tell Amber next time she wants to laugh behind my back, she better make sure the school doesn't hear it." That night, Caleb and I sat on the couch with popcorn and cartoons. Moose snored at our feet. No yelling. No tension. Just peace. And for the first time since the divorce, my boy fell asleep in my arms again, safe, warm, and finally, truly home. It was almost 2 weeks since the court's decision, and life in our little house had settled into something that felt real. Normal. Caleb woke up with his hair all wild, asking for cereal. He picked his own clothes, mismatched socks and all. We walked to school every morning, even in the rain. I didn't care if my boots got muddy. Watching him skip ahead with his backpack bouncing on his back made everything worth it. But peace doesn't mean silence. Not when echoes from the past still find ways to crawl under your skin. That Friday started fine. I had just dropped Caleb off. He gave me a high five and a grin, like he didn't have a care in the world. I was proud of that. Proud that he could finally be a kid again. But just as I turned to leave, I saw them. Amber and Brad. Parked right across the street in that shiny black SUV. She was leaning across the seat, whispering something to Brad, and then they both burst out laughing like teenagers behind the gym. Then Amber turned her head and spotted me. Her smirk was sharp and bitter. She mouthed something. I couldn't make it out, but I didn't need to. I knew that look, knew it like the back of my calloused hands. It was the same one she gave me in the lawyer's office when she said she deserved someone more interesting. The same look she had when she walked out of our house for good. Brad gave a mock salute with 2 fingers, then turned the key in the ignition and peeled off down the road. I stood there for a moment, trying to shake it off. But I couldn't. Not this time. At work, I kept thinking about it. I painted 3 rooms that day and barely remember lifting the roller. It wasn't the laughing that got me. It was what it meant. They were still trying to get under my skin. Still treating me like a punchline. After everything, after Caleb. Amber had lost, and yet somehow, they were acting like they'd won. That night, I sat on the back porch, watching the stars come out. Moose was curled up beside me, breathing slow. Caleb was already asleep inside, probably dreaming about superheroes or laser sharks or whatever he was into that week. I thought about how far we'd come. How I'd rebuilt everything with my own 2 hands. And still, that laughter echoed in my head like a hammer. The next day, the school hosted a family day, one of those Saturday events with games, food trucks, and music on the lawn. Caleb was pumped. He wore his favorite hoodie and dragged me from booth to booth. I didn't expect them to show up. But of course, they did. Amber in her designer jacket. Brad with sunglasses on, like it was the red carpet. They brought a stack of gift bags, little bribes, probably, to hand out to other parents. Like they were trying to charm their way back into everyone's good graces. It almost worked. Folks smiled, waved, laughed at Brad's dumb jokes. Then Amber saw me. She strutted over, plastering on a fake grin. Well, she said. How's Daddy daycare going? I clenched my jaw. Better than you think. She leaned in slightly. You know, Caleb's still going to want a real family. A fun one. I looked her dead in the eye. He has one. And he's not a toy you can borrow when you're bored. Brad walked over then, all puffed up. You sure talk big now that a judge gave you a gold star. Don't get too comfortable. Courts can change their minds. I didn't respond with anger. I didn't need to. Instead, I smiled, really smiled, and said, funny thing about change. Sometimes it's permanent. I turned to walk away, but then Caleb came running up behind me. Dad, come see my volcano. It's got real lava. Brad raised an eyebrow. He's calling you Dad now? Always has, I said without even turning around. And then we walked away, me and my boy. Hand in hand. Let them laugh. Let them sneer. Because I'd already won the only prize that mattered. Later that night, I took out the picture Caleb drew, me and Dad. Safe. I pinned it to the fridge. Under it, I stuck a note of my own. Let them laugh. I'll raise the man. Fall came in slow, golden waves. The trees lining our street burned orange and red like they were celebrating something, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself breathing easier. Caleb had started sleeping through the night. He laughed more. Ate better. He even got a Most Improved ribbon in class. He showed it off like he'd won a Nobel Prize, and honestly, that's how it felt to me too. But peace isn't the absence of noise. It's what fills the silence. And that silence started whispering something to me I hadn't allowed myself to hear before. You forgave too much. See, I thought winning custody would be enough. I thought watching Caleb thrive would scratch the itch, that it would close the wound Amber left when she twisted the knife and walked off with our son like I was some babysitter with bad timing. But I still remembered the day I found out she'd filed for full custody behind my back. How Brad had helped her draw it up, how they laughed outside the courthouse when I lost the first time. Like I was a joke. Like I'd never been a real father at all. And that day at school, the way they looked at me like they still had the upper hand? It lit something inside me. Not rage. Not jealousy. Something quieter. Sharper. Strategy. It started with a conversation. After one of Caleb's reading sessions, I pulled Miss Jenkins aside. She'd always been honest with me. Thoughtful. The kind of teacher you remember long after you leave school. Is everything still going all right with him? I asked. You'd tell me if anything was off. She looked at me kindly. He's doing great, Mr. Edwards. Honestly, I think he's happier here. His drawings used to be kind of dark. Angry. But lately? All smiles. Sunshine. Dinosaurs and camping. Good, I said, then hesitated. Do you ever see his mother or her boyfriend around here? Not much, she said. They stopped showing up at school events. Seemed to lose interest after the custody change. But, she paused, like she didn't want to overstep. There was something odd a couple weeks ago. What was it? Well, Caleb mentioned that Brad yelled at him. Something about breaking a remote. It didn't seem like a big thing at first, but Caleb said he hid in a closet afterward. My fists clenched without thinking. He didn't tell me that. Kids protect the people who scare them, she said softly. That was it. That was the crack in the armor. I didn't run to the courts again. I'd already fought that battle. I needed to be smarter this time. So I started keeping a log. Every time Caleb came back with a new excuse for why he didn't want to go to Amber's house on her weekends, I wrote it down. They left me with a babysitter again. Brad said not to touch his stuff or he'd throw it out. Mom said you were broke and boring. Each comment. Each reaction. Each shift in Caleb's behavior. Then I quietly asked my friend Mike, who worked IT at a private security firm, if there was a way to legally document an exchange. A school drop-off. A conversation. He set me up with a tiny clip-on audio recorder. Legal in our state, as long as one party in the conversation knows it's being recorded. And I waited. The next weekend, Amber was late to pick Caleb up. Again. When she finally pulled up, she didn't even get out of the car. Just hunked. Twice. Caleb clutched my hand like it was the first day of kindergarten all over again. I don't want to go. I know, bud, I said, kneeling beside him. Just hang in there. I'll be here when you get back." As he walked slowly to the car, I slipped the recorder into his backpack, right in the side pouch with his water bottle. He didn't notice. Neither did she. I didn't like doing it, but I needed the truth. Not for me. For him. 2 days later, I sat in the quiet of my garage, headphones on, listening to everything. Amber barely spoke to him. Brad? He spoke enough for both of them. "I'm sick of babysitting. Why don't you take him to your sister's? Stop crying. You're not a baby. You break one more thing in this house and you're done. Hear me?" I hit pause. Then came the worst part. "Amber, he's not even yours, Brad. You don't have to love him. Brad, well, his dad sure as hell doesn't deserve him." Amber laughed. And just like that, all the pain came flooding back. The same pain I felt when I saw them mocking me in that booth. When she filed that paperwork in secret. When she tried to erase me from my own son's life. I took off the headphones and sat still for a long time. No yelling. No smashing things. I just breathed. Because now, I had something stronger than anger. I had proof. I didn't sleep that night. The recorder sat on the kitchen table like it was glowing, daring me to hit play again. I didn't. Once was enough. Their voices were burned into my memory now, Amber's cold dismissal, Brad's threats, and the one thing I never thought I'd hear. "He's not even yours, Brad. You don't have to love him." That line kept spinning around in my head like a drunk at a county fair. I couldn't let it go. The cruelty in her voice, it didn't come from nowhere. It was deliberate. Calculated. That was the part that scared me. She wasn't just neglecting Caleb. She didn't care about him at all. I took a walk the next morning before the sun came up, just me and Moose down the dirt path behind our house. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you think deep and dark. My boots crunched in the frost, and Moose's breath puffed out in soft white clouds. There was a part of me that still didn't want to believe it. That still wanted to give Amber the benefit of the doubt. We had years together, holidays, inside jokes, nights when we talked about our dreams until we fell asleep holding hands. But then I remembered the way Caleb flinched when the front door slammed. The way he always asked me to double-check his bag, to make sure nothing was broken. That's not how kids are supposed to live. That's not how my son is going to live. When I got back, I called Mike. "I need you to clean up the audio," I said. "Cut out the filler, remove background noise, timestamp the worst stuff." He whistled low. "Damn, man. What's going on?" "I'm getting ready to end this," I said. "For good." By Monday, I had a neatly organized folder, clips, timestamps, a transcript, all printed and digital. I also had something else. Photos. See, I knew a guy named Deacon who owed me a favor. Real quiet, real good with a camera. I asked him to tail Brad and Amber over the weekend, nothing crazy, just eyes on them. And wouldn't you know it? They weren't even home during most of Caleb's visit. Left him with some sketchy teen babysitter who let him eat frozen corn dogs and stay up watching horror movies. Meanwhile, Brad and Amber were out at a winery in Napa, posting selfies like high schoolers. I now had a full arsenal: verbal abuse, neglect, and total disregard for Caleb's well-being. All I needed was a target. That target came Wednesday morning. Amber called me during lunch. I could hear music in the background, some annoying pop song. "Hey," she said casually, "we're thinking about taking Caleb with us on a cruise next month. It's Brad's sister's birthday. Figured he could use a little culture." I blinked. "A cruise? Yeah, relax. It's not like he's gonna get scurvy or anything. He'll love it." I paused. "You're not taking him anywhere," I said, my voice even. "Not anymore." She laughed. "You think you can stop me? I'm still his mother, remember?" "Yeah," I said. "And that used to mean something." I hung up. And then I made the call. It took a week to get everything in place. I handed the evidence to my lawyer, a quiet woman named Teresa who'd seen every kind of custody case you can imagine. Her eyebrows lifted when she read the transcript. "This is enough," she said. "You sure?" "Positive. We'll request an emergency hearing." "You're not asking for anything new, you're asking for protection." That word hit me deep. Protection. That's all I ever wanted. The night before the hearing, I sat on the floor in Caleb's room while he slept. The glow of his nightlight painted the ceiling in blue stars. His drawings were taped all over the wall, me, him, Moose, and a big sun always in the corner, smiling down on us. He didn't know it yet, but his whole life was about to change again. Only this time, it would be better. Safer. Permanent. I kissed his forehead, tucked his blanket tighter, and whispered, "I've got you, buddy. I'm never letting go." The next morning, I walked into that courthouse taller than I had in years. Amber showed up wearing a white blouse like she was the innocent one. Brad didn't even come. And when Teresa laid everything out, when she played the clips, read the quotes, showed the timestamps, Amber's whole posture changed. The judge didn't yell. Didn't need to. She looked Amber in the eyes and said, "You will not have unsupervised visitation until this court is satisfied the child's safety is guaranteed. Full decision pending investigation." Amber opened her mouth to argue, but the judge raised a hand. "This court has heard enough." We walked out of there in silence. Outside the courthouse, Amber finally spoke. "You set me up." "No," I said. "You did that to yourself." She stared at me, eyes wide and glassy. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said, leaning closer. "I know I'm better for him." And I turned away. Amber didn't follow. For the first time, she didn't have anything to laugh about. It was early, brisk air, that golden California morning glow stretching long shadows across the sidewalk. I poured Caleb cereal while he sat at the table in his little Spider-Man pajamas, legs swinging, humming some tune he made up on the spot. He was all peace that morning. All heart. You could just feel it. It had been a week since the court gave me temporary full custody. Amber hadn't called once. Not even to ask how he was. That used to bother me. Now, it only confirmed what I already knew. She never really wanted Caleb. She just didn't want me to have him. But now, I did. "Dad," Caleb said, mouth full of milk and cereal, "can I show Miss Warner my volcano today?" "You bet," I said, tossing him a wink. "It's the coolest one I've ever seen. You might even win Scientist of the Month." His grin spread so wide, I thought it might knock over the spoon in his hand. We packed up his project, a baking soda volcano with a cardboard jungle glued around it, and got in the truck. Moose wanted to come too, so I let him ride shotgun. Caleb laughed the whole drive as Moose kept trying to stick his head out the window even though it wasn't open. When we pulled up to the school, kids were already swarming in, parents kissing foreheads, teachers holding coffee cups. Everything felt normal, blessedly normal. I got out with Caleb, helped him out of the truck, and carried the volcano while he held Moose's leash. Miss Warner spotted us and came walking over, her smile wide. "Well, if it isn't our resident geologist," she said, crouching down to Caleb's level. "Is this your big volcano?" Caleb nodded proudly. "It's gonna explode a lot." She chuckled, looking up at me. "Looks like someone's been busy." I smiled back. "He's been working hard. Hasn't even touched his video games all week." Miss Warner's expression softened. I could see it, she saw the difference in him already. The peace in his eyes. The steadiness in how he stood. She'd seen the before. Now she was seeing the after. That's when it happened. A car pulled into the parking lot too fast, Amber's silver sedan. I recognized it instantly. She screeched to a halt, flung the door open, and stepped out in sunglasses and a wrinkled jacket. No makeup. No polish. Just fury and panic. "Caleb," she yelled, loud enough to make the teachers flinch. Caleb stiffened beside me. Moose growled low, pulling toward her with his hackles up. Amber stormed over, ignoring everyone. "What the hell are you doing here? He's mine. You stole him from me." Parents turned. Teachers exchanged glances. Miss Warner stood up, firm as a soldier now. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "you need to lower your voice. This is a school zone." "I don't care." Amber screamed. "Give me my son, you piece of trash." I looked down at Caleb. His hand was gripping the leash so tight his knuckles were white. His lip trembled. That's when I knelt beside him. "Buddy," I said softly, "who do you want to take you in today?" He didn't hesitate. "You." Louder now, so everyone could hear, he added, "I want to stay with you, Dad. I don't want to go with her. She yells too much." Amber froze. Her mouth hung open. Her rage had nowhere left to go. I stood, facing her. Calm. Not smug. Just done. "There it is," I said quietly. "That's the truth." Security showed up. The principal asked her to leave. She cursed them, cried, even tried to guilt Caleb, but he wouldn't look at her. He turned away, holding my hand, and walked into the school with Miss Warner and Moose by his side. And me? I stood there on the sidewalk, watching her get escorted back to her car, her mascara starting to run behind her sunglasses. Brad wasn't with her. He hadn't been seen in weeks. Maybe he left. Maybe he realized what kind of woman she really was. Didn't matter anymore. The war was over. I'd won the only battle that mattered. When I picked Caleb up that afternoon, he came running out of the classroom with his Volcano, Scientist of the Month ribbon taped to the side. "Guess what, Dad? They're gonna let me do the volcano at the assembly. Miss Warner said I could do the big eruption on stage." I scooped him up with a laugh, hugged him tight, and said, "That's amazing, buddy." We got in the truck, Moose jumped in the back, and as we pulled out of the school lot, Caleb said, "Hey Dad?" "Yeah, bud? Thanks for picking me." "I picked you too." My throat tightened, but I kept my eyes on the road. "I know, son," I whispered. "I know." And that was it. That was the day I took him to school, and got everything back. Not just my boy. Not just peace. But myself. The man I'd buried in heartbreak and court papers, the one who loved without fear, who protected what mattered, who fought back, he was standing tall again. And this time, I wasn't going anywhere. Not for anyone. Not ever again.